Most people believe their financial life reaches its peak at 65, that retirement is the moment you finally step off the treadmill and start spending what you've built. But the truth is far less comforting. Stopping at 65 isn't a reward. It's a mathematical disaster disguised as tradition. And I learned that the hard way, watching a man who did everything right still end up broke. He was a neighbor of mine growing up. Quiet, disciplined, saved every month, worked 3 decades at the same company. By the time he hit 65, he had a solid portfolio. Not wealthy, but comfortable. Then he did what everyone around him told him to do. He stopped saving, shifted into safe investments, started withdrawing, and treated compounding like something that no longer mattered. 10 years later, he wasn't comfortable anymore. 20 years later, he was out of money. Not because he failed, but because he interrupted the one force in finance that never stops working. People think they retire from their jobs, but what they really retire from is patience. And that's the mistake. Because compound interest doesn't peak in your 30s or 40s or even your 50s. It peaks at the exact moment most people decide to slam on the brakes. The final decades are where it gets explosive. The biggest gains, the strangest curves, the kind of growth that feels impossible until you actually live long enough to see it. So when someone stops building wealth at 65, they're not just pausing. They're cutting the engine right before takeoff. They're abandoning a system designed to reward those who stay in the game just a little longer. And if you live to 85, 90, or beyond, that interruption becomes the most expensive decision of your life. This isn't motivation. This is math. And the math is relentless. The question isn't whether compounding still works after 65. The question is whether you're going to keep letting it work for you or walk away right before it does its best work. People talk about compound interest as if it's some textbook concept you learn once and forget. But the truth is, compounding is the closest thing to real financial magic that exists. And the reason most people never experience its full power has nothing to do with intelligence. It's because compounding saves the best for last, and most people quit before the finale. If you want proof, just look at Warren Buffett. People call him a genius, but the real story is much simpler. He started early, he never stopped, and he let time do the heavy lifting. 90% of his net worth was accumulated after he turned 65. Not because he suddenly got smarter, but because compounding finally entered its explosive stage. His wealth didn't rise gradually. It curved upward like a rocket, slow, slow, and then all at once. But you don't need billions to understand this. Imagine you invest $10,000 and let it grow at 7% a year. After 10 years, it's not impressive, about 19,000. After 20 years, it's 38,000. After 30 years, 76,000. But watch what happens after 40 years, 150,000. And after 50 years, almost 300,000. The biggest jump doesn't come at the beginning. It comes at the end. That's how compounding works. It rewards the patient and punishes the quitters. The early years feel boring. Nothing seems to happen. Your balance inches upward, and you wonder why everyone talks about compounding like it's some miracle. Then, somewhere in decade 3 or 4, everything changes. The growth stops being linear and starts being absurd. The numbers bend upward so sharply that you feel like someone flipped a switch. And that's the tragedy. Most people walk away right before the switch flips. They save for decades, they get to 65, and then they interrupt the exact process that was finally about to work in their favor. They treat compounding like a clock that stops ticking at retirement age, when in reality, the final decades are the most valuable decades. If there's one rule in finance that separates the people who win from the people who barely get by, it's this: never interrupt compounding unnecessarily. You don't need brilliance. You don't need perfect timing. You just need time itself and the discipline not to break the machine right before it hits full speed. People misunderstand the entire point of saving and investing. They think the goal is to reach some number so they can finally stop being disciplined, finally loosen up, finally enjoy life. But that mindset has nothing to do with freedom. In fact, it's the fastest way to lose it. Because financial freedom isn't what happens when you stop being disciplined. Financial freedom is what happens when discipline becomes effortless. I learned this from a retired firefighter I met in Arizona. He spent 30 years running into burning buildings, and when he finally stepped away from the job, everyone around him told him the same thing. "You've worked hard enough. Now relax. You deserve it." And he did relax, but not the way they meant. He kept saving, kept investing, kept living below his means, even though he didn't have to. When I asked him why, he laughed and said, "Because I like knowing I'll never be forced into a corner again. That's my version of relaxing." He wasn't obsessed with money. He was obsessed with independence. And independence doesn't retire at 65. People think financial discipline is a burden, something you endure until you reach your magic number. But the people who actually win, the ones who stay secure, no matter what the market does, no matter what emergency hits, those people treat discipline like oxygen. It's not something they turn off. It's something they live with, not out of fear, but out of identity. Most people want freedom, but they chase comfort instead. They think comfort is freedom. It's not. Comfort disappears the moment something goes wrong. Freedom is when nothing going wrong can take anything away from you. Freedom is the ability to walk away from any job, any situation, any pressure, without worrying about the next bill. That's why the smartest people don't stop building wealth when they retire. They don't shift into a lifestyle of finally spending. They understand that stopping isn't freedom. Stopping is surrendering the very habit that created their freedom in the first place. The firefighter told me something I never forgot. He said, "Everyone thinks I'm frugal because I have to be. I'm frugal because I want to be. It makes me feel untouchable." That's the mindset most people never reach. When saving stops feeling like sacrifice and starts feeling like power. True financial independence isn't about hitting a number. It's about becoming the kind of person who doesn't need the number to stay independent. The biggest mistake investors make isn't choosing the wrong stock. It's losing the ability to sit still. In a world where every headline screams urgency and every app begs you to check your balance one more time, sitting still feels irresponsible. But the truth is brutally simple. Movement destroys more wealth than bad investments ever will. Warren Buffett didn't build his empire by outsmarting Wall Street every day. He built it by ignoring Wall Street most days. He once said his favorite holding period is forever. And people laugh at that line, but they miss the point. Buffett wins because he refuses to interrupt compounding. He wins by sitting still, even when the world around him is losing its mind. I once talked to a financial advisor who told me most of his clients didn't fail because they picked poor investments. They failed because they couldn't resist touching their portfolios. They bought high because everyone else was euphoric. They sold low because fear became contagious. They traded, tinkered, adjusted, reacted. Every move felt like control, but every move silently drained their future. It's a psychological trap. The human brain hates stillness. Stillness feels like danger. Doing something, anything, feels like safety. It's the same instinct that makes people jiggle a broken elevator button, even though it doesn't do anything. We equate movement with progress, action with intelligence. But in investing, movement is often self-sabotage. Here's the comparison that reveals everything. The market is like a stormy ocean. The more you thrash, the faster you sink. The people who survive aren't the strongest or the quickest. They're the ones who float, the ones who stay calm long enough to let the waves settle. Most investors drown because they mistake turbulence for risk. They panic at a 20 or 30% drop, not realizing those drops are baked into the price of admission. Buffett has lived through dozens of crashes, dozens. He didn't survive them because he predicted them. He survived because he sat still through them. The tragedy is that people hit 65 and suddenly feel obligated to start doing something with their money. They hire managers who trade too much, chase yield because low interest rates scare them, shift into complicated products they don't understand. The more they try to manage, the more compounding bleeds out the back door. Sitting still is not laziness. It's a strategy, a powerful one. It takes character to hold quality investments and let time do what time does best. It takes discipline to ignore noise. And it takes real courage to do nothing when doing nothing feels like the one thing you shouldn't do. But the people who master stillness are the ones who win, not because they know more, but because they interrupt less. Wealth isn't built by motion. Wealth is built by patience, by restraint, and by the quiet confidence to trust the math long enough for it to work. If you want to understand why some Americans quietly build real financial security while others spend their entire lives stressed about money, it usually comes down to one thing: the ability to delay gratification. Not the ability to make more money or pick the perfect investments or time the market, just the ability to wait. I once met a single mother from Ohio who worked 2 jobs for almost a decade. She told me she never bought anything she couldn't pay for twice, and she never touched a dollar that was meant for her future. While everyone around her upgraded their cars, took vacations they couldn't afford, and lived paycheck to paycheck, she kept her lifestyle simple. Not because she loved sacrifice, but because she loved the idea of never being financially trapped again. 20 years later, she wasn't just comfortable, she was free. The people who laughed at her frugality were still struggling. She wasn't lucky. She outweighted them. Deferred gratification is the great separator. It doesn't show up in your income. It shows up in your habits. It shows up in the moment you walk past the thing you want now because you care more about what it becomes later. It's the psychological equivalent of planting a tree you know you won't get shade from for years. Most people want the shade today, so they buy the tree, cut it down, and wonder why their yard stays empty. Most Americans don't fail financially because of one big mistake. They fail because of 1,000 tiny decisions driven by impatience. Upgrading the phone early, trading the portfolio too often, borrowing for lifestyle, spending for comfort, choosing now over later again and again, until later shows up and looks nothing like what they hoped. The marshmallow test wasn't really about children. It was about human nature. And adults fail that test every day with far more expensive marshmallows. A new truck, a kitchen remodel, a weekend getaway bought on credit. These things feel good now, but they quietly steal from your future. The people who win with money aren't always the highest earners. They're the ones who treat patience like a competitive advantage. They understand that choosing not to spend is not deprivation. It's strategy, it's strength, it's control. While everyone else is chasing short-term comfort, they're building long-term freedom. And freedom, once earned, feels far better than whatever they gave up to get it. Deferred gratification isn't about denying yourself joy. It's about timing your joy so it doesn't own you. It's about building a life where your future is bigger than your impulses. And the moment that shift happens, the moment discipline stops feeling like sacrifice and starts feeling like power, you stop living paycheck to paycheck and start living on your own terms. One of the most dangerous myths in American finance is the belief that life after 65 is a downhill coast, a period where you can finally stop thinking and let your money carry you. But that mindset is the reason so many retirees end up scared, stressed, or broke. The truth is simple. The wrong decisions after 65 can destroy everything you spent decades building. I once met a man in Florida who retired with what most people would call a comfortable nest egg. He assumed he'd live to around 78 because that was the average, so he planned his withdrawals accordingly. He bought a new car, upgraded his house, helped his kids with big expenses, and shifted his investments into things he didn't fully understand but were advertised as safe. He wasn't reckless, he was overly confident. By 89, he had outlived his plan, outlived his money, and outlived the assumptions that got him into trouble. He didn't fail at retirement. He miscalculated longevity. That's the first psychological trap, overconfidence. People assume they know how long they'll live, even though no one actually does. Living longer than expected should be a blessing, but without preparation, it becomes a burden. The second trap is mistaking volatility for danger. The market drops 20% and panic takes over. People sell at the bottom, lock in losses, and tell themselves they're being safe. But safety isn't panic selling. Safety is being able to hold steady while everyone else loses their mind. The third trap is chasing yield. Low interest rates make retirees desperate for income, and that desperation leads them straight into products designed to look safe but built to blow up. The financial industry knows retirees want comfort, and they package that comfort into complicated investments that drain your money slowly and quietly. And then there's the quietest mistake of all, interrupting compounding for consumption. Buying a car, renovating a kitchen, taking a luxury trip. These things feel harmless, even deserved. But every dollar spent from a compounding engine isn't just a dollar lost. It's the hundreds of future dollars that dollar was supposed to become. The good news is that avoiding these mistakes is far simpler than people think. First, plan as if you'll live longer than you expect, because odds are you will. Second, build a portfolio you can emotionally hold through a 50% drop, because drops like that are not rare, they are normal. Third, avoid any investment you don't fully understand, no matter how comforting the sales pitch sounds. And finally, treat every withdrawal like it's coming out of your future, because it is. The people who succeed financially after 65 aren't the people who made perfect decisions in their youth. They're the people who avoided catastrophic mistakes in their later years. They stayed patient when others panicked, skeptical when others were overconfident, and disciplined when others relaxed. Retirement is not the finish line. It's the point where your behavior matters more than ever. One bad decision can unravel decades of good ones. One moment of fear can erase years of discipline. And one assumption, especially about how long you'll live, can turn a comfortable retirement into a crisis. Protecting your future doesn't require brilliance. It requires humility, caution, and the courage to avoid the traps that most people walk into with their eyes wide open. Because after 65, your greatest risk isn't the market. It's underestimating the future. If there's one truth every American needs to hear, it's this. Your future will not be determined by how much money you have today, but by how you behave from this moment forward. Compounding doesn't reward the smartest. It rewards the most consistent. It rewards the people who refuse to quit just because a birthday tells them they're supposed to slow down. I once heard a 90-year-old investor say something that stuck with me for years. He said, "People think I'm disciplined because I'm old. No, I'm old because I stayed disciplined." And there was so much truth in that one sentence, it almost felt like a punch. He didn't live long and prosper because he was wealthy. He became wealthy because he lived long enough for compounding to finally reveal what it had been quietly building for decades. Most people never get to see that part. They stop. They interrupt the one force in finance that never stops working. They think 65 is the finish line, when in reality it's the beginning of the greatest financial decade of their lives, if they keep going. The difference between the person who quits and the person who continues is not intelligence, luck, or talent. It's behavior. Behavior over 20 or 30 years is stronger than any salary, any stock pick, any moment of brilliance. Behavior is what turns modest savings into generational wealth. Behavior is what protects you when the world gets messy. Behavior is what keeps your future intact long after everyone else has run out of theirs. You don't control the market. You don't control the economy. You don't control how long you'll live. But you control whether you keep compounding or cut the engine right before takeoff. You control whether you stay disciplined or drift into the habits that destroy retirements every day. So here's the wake-up call. Do not stop. Not at 65, not at 75, not ever. Keep saving something. Keep investing something. Keep sitting still when noise tempts you to panic. Keep your behavior strong enough to carry you into the decades most people never get to benefit from because they quit too early. The math is on your side, but only if you stay in the game long enough for the math to work in your favor. Discipline is not a phase, it's the engine. And if you keep that engine running, your future, no matter your age, will be bigger than anything you imagined.